Well, congratulations are in order, Cardinals fans. It looks like you've got one less thing to worry about as Kyle Hendricks is leaving the Cubs, the NL Central, and the National League entirely. It was reported by Bruce Levine on Wednesday. He covers the Cubs and baseball up in Chicago for 670 The Score. He tweeted this out. Sources, former Cub pitcher Kyle Hendricks and the Angels are close to agreeing on a one-year deal. And, of course, the Angels are in the AL. Cardinals fans, the long national nightmare is over. Kyle Hendricks and his performance against the Cardinals over the years has been one of the most inexplicable things that we have seen in sports, as this guy who just goes up there and lobs the ball over the plate at about 80 miles per hour has stymied the Cardinals for years. And, of course, he's been with the longtime Cardinal rival, the Cubs, for his entire career. Got there in 2014 and was there up until this past year in 2024, all the way through. He was a really good pitcher back when he was younger. Had a 2.13 ERA back in 2016. That was the year the Cubs won the World Series. He finished third in the Cy Young race that year. So he hasn't always been this Cardinals beating merchant, and that's all he can do. Like, he used to be a pretty legit pitcher, but last year his ERA was 5.92. He just fell off considerably in his age 34 season, but not when facing the Cardinals. In just one of the most bizarre and yet sort of predictable phenomenon as the season went along, and you saw Kyle Hendricks a few times, he continued to dominate St. Louis. It is just one of those things that you can't really explain because it has been true across different eras of Cardinal baseball. I mean, he's been there for 10 plus years. It doesn't matter who's in the lineup. It doesn't matter who's on the team. It doesn't matter what, past history, what the splits are. Any of it it's just not mattered. He faced the Cardinals twice this past season. You remember the first occasion was June 14th, and he had actually recently been pulled from the starting rotation at that point in the middle of May. He was getting lit up. I think his last start, I'm looking up the numbers now, he gave up 7 earned runs, 8 total runs, and didn't get through 5 innings. And that was against the Pirates on May 17th. So that tells you a little bit about where he was. His ERA at that point was 10.57. This was last year. And then a few weeks later, Cardinals, Cubs at Busch Stadium. And in the first inning, the Cubs starter gets injured. And then who do you see warming up in the bullpen but Kyle Hendricks? Comes in, 4 1/3, shutout innings. Cardinals lost 3-0 that day. You think, hey, you knocked the starter out after an inning or so. Should give you a great chance to get at the Cubs bullpen. I think that was even early in a series against the Cubs, too, where you start a longer series and you're thinking, all right, get to their bullpen game 1. Nope, Kyle Hendricks comes in. His ERA that day went from 9.07 to 8.20. Dropped it nearly a full run, and it was the middle of the summer by that point. He had logged quite a few innings and just stymied the Cardinals for 4 1/3. 2 hits, no walks, easy. Not throwing hard, not doing anything special, but just mowing down the Cardinals like he always does. And then he got another opportunity against the Cardinals later on, about a month later, July the 12th, and the man threw 7 shutout innings. Like, you can't make this up. 7 shutout innings, 5 hits allowed, only walked 1, 3 strikeouts. That day, his ERA went from 7.53 to 6.78. He threw 11 1/3 scoreless innings against the Cardinals last season. His numbers against the rest of the league, the non-Cardinals numbers, were pitiful. Like, he had a 5.92 ERA on the whole in 130 innings. But if he didn't have those 11 scoreless innings, it would have been even worse. Like, those 2 games against the Cardinals lowered his season ERA from what would have been 6.50 or so, just doing some rough math, to the 5.92. More than half a run from those 2 days on the season took him from 6.5 down under 6. The Cardinals cannot hit this guy. So, yeah, it's time to rejoice. Bruce Levine says he's going to the American League. He's going to the Angels. He's not your problem anymore, Cardinals fans. I'm surprised, honestly, that the Cubs didn't try strategically to line him up against the Cardinals more than just those 2 times. There's a case to be made that before this news came from the Angels, and we're kind of wondering, all right, what are the Cardinals going to do with their rotation this year? There is a case to be made that if it's not a very hefty salary, which for a 35-year-old Kyle Hendricks coming off of an ERA of 5.92, which, again, Angels better be aware that they're not getting a guy with a 5.92 ERA unless they throw him against the Cardinals whenever those two teams match up in 2025. Because against everybody else in the league, he's awful at this point in his career. Maybe he has a bounce back. Who knows? Really, last year was his first truly bad season because he had been a guy in the ERA in the 2s and the 3s, and I think maybe even had a couple years in the 4s, 2021, 2022. So, yeah, I mean, mostly has been on that decline a little bit. 2023 was better, ERA in the mid-3s. But if he's facing the Cardinals, he's pretty much a lock over the course of his career to get deep into the game. And it never looks pretty. It never looks fancy. It's just Cardinals get themselves out, it seems like, when they face Kyle Hendricks. I want to look at the career splits of Hendricks against the Cardinals because it's got to be just bonkers. Cardinals, so their OPS against him is not crazy bad, 644. But that's over a pretty large sample size. He's faced the Cardinals in 28 games in his career. And they've got a 644 OPS against him. But the ERA, so like what they actually produce in terms of getting runs across, it's basically a full season. What did I say, 28 games? This is basically one full major league season. If you have a starter, you'd like to see the guy go 30 starts in the year. But let's just pretend this is about a year. He's had an MLB season's worth of appearances against the Cardinals in his career. 27 starts, 28 total games. 179 innings pitched. Only 118 strikeouts. So, again, it's not like he's blowing them away. 2.51 career ERA against the Cardinals, which is hard to do over such a large sample. Like, there are teams that have performed worse against Hendricks. The Giants, the Marlins, the A's, the Mariners, the Astros, the Guardians he's got a lower ERA against those teams. But he's faced those teams far less. The Guardians, Astros, Mariners, Athletics, he's only faced either 1 or 2 times. The Marlins, he's faced 9 times, and they kind of stink. Over the course of the last decade, they've had a couple of standout years, but largely not a very good offense, so that's maybe not altogether surprising. The Giants, that one, a little bit funky, 2.33 ERA. It makes a little bit of sense, I think, because you'd figure that a number of those games probably took place in San Francisco, more of a spacious outfield pitcher's park, and he's a good pitch-to-contact pitcher, Kyle Hendricks, over the years. But the fact that it's sustained when Kyle Hendricks is no longer that same guy, no longer that guy that was a top 3 finisher in the Cy Young, no longer that guy that was toward the top of a big league competitive rotation. With where he is at this point, and what we saw this past summer, where against everybody else he was abysmal, and against the Cardinals it was like nothing has ever changed since 2014. Kind of crazy. 2.51 ERA. He's got a full major league season, and he's basically been Cy Young over the course of that season. That season's worth of experience, I guess. 14-4 record, 14 wins. Cardinals beat him 4 times. I struggle to remember when those took place because it just seems like every time they face him, it's a brutal outcome. StatMuse has, it looks like they've locked some of the more recent events because I'm looking at the career game log of Hendricks against the Cardinals, and I can't see anything on this particular page from last year, 2023, which I just gave you guys that information anyway. But you'd have to go back. I can check it for 2023, but according to this, you'd have to go back to the last time he gave up more than, 2 earned runs against the Cardinals was 2019. Could that possibly even be right? I'll check and see if he faced the Cardinals in 2023. Obviously, with what we just looked at, the game logs from last year, he did not give up anything, not a single run in 11 1/3. Back in 23, he faced the Cardinals, 7 innings, 2 earned runs, and that appears to have been the only time he faced them 2 seasons ago. So yeah, it's been since 2019 since the Cardinals have actually really scratched anything across against Kyle Hendricks in the way of earned runs. Even if you're talking unearned runs, it's been since 2021 since they got more than 2 total runs against him in a given game. And only twice in the past basically 8 or 9 years have they gotten more than 3 runs against him. The best they've ever done was 4 earned runs. They've done that a few times. but it's never been like just an absolute demolition. And when you face somebody 28 times, you would think that the Cardinals at some point would have rocked him. Nope, never happened. So anyway, I don't know what the salary terms are when it comes to this Kyle Hendricks contract, but if Bruce Levine is meant to be believed, which again, I feel like he'd be plugged in, John Heyman has since reported it, so I think you can basically trust that it's going to be the case. I don't know what he's making. Whatever it is, though, it's worth it to the Cardinals. Again, I thought there would maybe be a chance. I kind of got sidetracked talking about this, but there was an argument to be made that maybe the Cardinals should sign him just to, if it's a low-cost acquisition, to be kind of a sixth starter and throw some meaningless innings just to make sure that the Cubs couldn't throw him against him. Heyman reports it's going to be about $3 million. Yep, that would have been 100% worth it. If the Cardinals got wind that he wasn't going to go to an AL team or that the Cubs were trying to re-sign him, I would have paid an extra $500,000, even in an era right now where the Cardinals are going to be trimming payroll, just to make sure you didn't face him. It's one of the most inexplicable aspects of sports and just one of those idiosyncrasies that you sometimes see. But I don't know that I can think of very many other, just everybody knows. When you see Kyle Hendricks, like that day, I remember that day in June when the Cubs pull him, the starter, I forget who it was that day, but they after like an inning, and then you're like, okay, Cardinals might have a chance here today. And then they showed it on the broadcast. They just like the image that they show before going to commercial break of who was coming out of the bullpen to pitch the next, to be the next pitcher. And I said, oh, bleep, it's Kyle Hendricks. And from that moment, you knew the way the rest of that day was going to go. Just kind of, it's funny, but it's not. You know what I mean? It's funny because it's just one of those weird sports things that everybody who's a Cardinals fan knows exactly what to expect when you see Kyle Hendricks. But it's not that funny if you're a Cardinals fan because he's just kicked your butt for however many years. But hey, other than maybe a series against the Angels next year, because I think with the balanced schedule, everybody plays everybody. If Los Angeles is not making sure that Kyle Hendricks is on the docket for that Cardinals series, they're not doing their jobs on the scouting report very, very effectively. But anyway, that's what's going on. We'll continue to have lots of sports stories, lots of Cardinals content for the channel. So thank you guys for indulging me in ranting about Kyle Hendricks for a little bit. Let me know what you'd like to see. We're just kind of waiting, right? We're waiting to see what Cardinals news is going to come about. It's going to happen in November. You got to figure that things are about to heat up. Whether it's going to be positive news is not necessarily a prediction of mine, but there will be stuff to talk about. So make sure you guys are locked into the channel. Appreciate you, as always, for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Peace.